Many people believe that to stand out, you need to be smarter, know more, or possess some kind of special talent. But the truth is simpler and harder to accept. What really creates the gap between you and most people isn't knowledge, it's the way you think and respond to life. There are people who aren't exceptionally gifted at the beginning, yet over time they become different, calmer, sharper, and less easily pulled into negative emotions. This doesn't happen because of luck, but because they see things in a very different way. While most people react out of habit, arguing when challenged, worrying about things they can't control, or making decisions in the heat of the moment, a small number choose to pause, observe, and think more deeply. These small differences in thinking, repeated over time, eventually create a significant gap. This video isn't about becoming a genius. It's about helping you recognize simple but highly effective ways of thinking. If you understand and apply them, you'll start to see things more clearly, act with greater intention, and gradually rise above most people, without having to force it. Most people have a very familiar reflex. When they're challenged, they immediately feel the need to prove themselves right. Conversations quickly turn into debates, where each person tries to defend their point of view at all costs. But the problem is, the more you focus on winning, the more likely you are to lose what actually matters most: genuine understanding. Intelligent people realize that the goal of a conversation isn't to win, but to discover new perspectives. Instead of reacting instantly, they choose to slow down and ask questions. They don't rush to reject, nor do they try to impose their thinking on others. They want to understand. Why does the other person think this way? What led them to believe in that perspective? This curiosity allows them to access more information, rather than just repeating what they already know. Interestingly, when you stop trying to win, people tend to open up more. They no longer feel attacked, which makes them more willing to share, honestly. As a result, the conversation becomes much deeper and far more valuable. On the other hand, when you're overly focused on being right or wrong, you unintentionally shut down opportunities to learn. You might win an argument, but miss out on a perspective that could completely change the way you see things. Truly exceptional people aren't the ones who are always right, but the ones who are always willing to understand. And sometimes, just by making one simple shift, from arguing to asking, you've already started thinking differently from most people. Most people tend to react strongly to immediate problems. A small mistake can quickly make them anxious, lose their composure, or start doubting themselves. They see situations as final conclusions. Failure means they're not capable. Rejection means they're not good enough. But those who think differently don't view things this way. They make a habit of stepping back to see the bigger picture. Instead of getting caught up in the emotions of a single moment, they ask themselves, what does this really mean in the long run? A mistake today might be just a tiny part of a much larger journey. A failure isn't the end. It's simply data to help adjust direction. This perspective keeps them from getting stuck in temporary negative emotions. When you start seeing things as a process rather than a fixed outcome, the way you respond begins to change. You're no longer rushing to conclusions. Instead, you observe, analyze, and look for patterns. You begin to realize that most problems can be worked through if you look wide enough and stay with them long enough. People who stand out aren't those who never face difficulties, but those who don't. Let small setbacks throw them off course. When you learn to see the bigger picture, you become calmer, more patient, and far more precise in your decisions than most people. One of the biggest reasons people feel exhausted isn't because they're doing too much. It's because they're worrying about too many things they can't control. Other people's opinions, things that haven't happened yet, or uncertain outcomes all consume a huge amount of mental energy, yet offer little real value. People who think effectively understand this boundary very clearly. Instead of trying to control everything, they accept that some things are simply beyond their reach. They don't try to force others to change their minds. They don't dwell on what's already happened, and they don't spend excessive time imagining worst-case scenarios. Instead, they focus on what they can actually influence: their actions, their attitude, and how they respond. This shift may seem small, but it creates a powerful difference. When you invest your energy into what's within your control, you become more effective, more focused, and less distracted. You're no longer pulled in every direction by emotions or circumstances. You begin to take an active role in shaping your life. On the other hand, if you keep trying to control everything, you'll constantly feel frustrated and powerless. because most of the world doesn't operate according to your expectations. People who truly stand out aren't those who control everything, but those who know exactly where to direct their focus and have the strength to let go of what doesn't matter. Most people feel uncomfortable with silence. When a conversation slows down, they rush to fill the gap with words, sometimes speaking more than necessary just to avoid awkwardness. But those who think deeply see silence in a completely different way. To them, silence isn't emptiness, it's a tool. Instead of reacting immediately, they take a few seconds to think. That small pause allows them to observe more clearly, understand the situation better, and respond with greater quality. They don't speak just to fill space. They speak when there's actually something worth saying. This gives their words more weight and makes others more likely to listen. Silence also helps you read people. When you're not rushing to talk, you have time to notice tone, expressions, and what isn't being said. You begin to understand the other person's emotions and intentions on a deeper level, rather than just hearing their words on the surface. On the other hand, when you talk too much, you not only dilute the value of your words, but also miss opportunities to observe and learn. People who truly stand out don't need to speak constantly to prove themselves. They create influence through calmness and by choosing the right moment to speak. Sometimes, silence itself is the clearest expression of confidence and depth. Most people live in a constant state of reaction. A harsh comment, an unexpected situation, or a wave of negative emotion appears, and they respond instantly. They reply while angry, make decisions while anxious, and act before they've had time to think. The problem isn't the emotion itself, but allowing that emotion to take control of everything. People who think effectively understand that there is always a small space between stimulus and response, and in that space is where control exists. Instead of reacting immediately, they give themselves a few seconds to think. Is this really worth getting upset over? Or, what response will lead to the best outcome? Just by slowing down slightly, they avoid many unnecessary mistakes. This pause helps them separate themselves from temporary emotions. They don't deny what they feel, but they also don't let those feelings dictate their actions. Because of this, they're able to stay calm even in stressful situations and make more intentional choices rather than impulsive ones. On the other hand, when you react instantly, you're often acting out of habit or emotion, and that's when regret tends to follow. A rushed comment can hurt someone. A hasty decision can lead to long-term consequences. People who truly stand out aren't those without emotions, but those who know how to manage their responses to them. And sometimes, the greatest strength isn't in what you do, but in your ability to choose not to act right away. One of the quiet forces shaping many people's behavior is the need for validation. They want to be liked, agreed with, and seen as right or good enough. Because of that, they often adjust what they say, how they act, and even how they think to match other people's expectations. But the more they try to please everyone, the more they lose their inner clarity. People who think differently understand something simple. You can't, and don't need to, be accepted by everyone. Each person has their own perspective, values, and standards. Trying to satisfy all of them isn't just impossible, it also makes you inconsistent. Instead of seeking approval from the outside, they focus on understanding who they are, what they believe, and what truly matters to them. When you're no longer dependent on validation, your decisions become more decisive. You say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done, even knowing that some people may disagree. This doesn't make you rigid, it makes you clear and more trustworthy. On the other hand, if you constantly need approval, you become easily influenced by other people's opinions. Praise can lift you too high, while criticism can quickly make you doubt yourself. People who truly stand out aren't the ones loved by everyone, but the ones who refuse to trade their identity for acceptance. And it's this independence that creates a deeper kind of confidence, one that naturally earns respect over time. Most people aren't truly thinking, they're simply repeating what they've heard, seen, or been taught. They believe something because the majority believes it. They make decisions based on trends, popular opinions, or pressure from their environment. This can make them feel safe, but it also limits their ability to see things with real depth. Independent thinkers are different. They don't rush to believe, and they don't rush to reject either. When they come across new information, they ask themselves, does this actually make sense? Is there evidence behind it? Is there another perspective I haven't considered? They're willing to question even the most obvious ideas, and they're not afraid to go against the crowd if it's reasonable to do so. Thinking independently doesn't mean always being different. It means understanding why you believe what you believe. You're not easily pulled by public opinion, and you're less likely to be manipulated by strong or persuasive voices. You develop the ability to analyze, evaluate, and form your own conclusions. This is especially important in a world where information is constant and not always accurate. If you don't think for yourself, it's very easy to be influenced without even realizing it. On the other hand, when you build independent thinking, you become more grounded in your own perspective. You don't need to speak all the time, but when you do, you know exactly what you're saying and why. People who truly stand out aren't those who are always right, but those who continuously question and refine how they think. And that's what keeps them from getting stuck in the flawed thinking of the majority. You don't need to become perfect or exceptional overnight to stand out. In reality, simply changing the way you think in small, everyday situations is enough to create a completely different path. When you stop arguing just to understand, learn to see beyond the moment instead of reacting instantly. Focus on what you can control, use silence wisely, and avoid being pulled by the crowd. You begin to separate yourself from most people. Real change doesn't come from dramatic leaps, but from subtle, consistent shifts. Over time, the way you think shapes the way you act, and the way you act shapes your life. And once you realize that, you don't just become smarter, you become more grounded, more in control, and ultimately freer in your own life.